telefónica para que la comunidad pueda llamar y tenga acceso a interpretación en español de la reunión en vivo. El número a llamar es 508-924-5155. 508-924-5155.
Thank you. For those who are not able to observe now, this meeting is being recorded and can be accessed for later viewing on the Pre-G-CPS YouTube channel. Lastly, for recording purposes, I would like also to remind all of the board members to turn on their microphone when they are speaking. Board Member Zipporah Miller, please lead us in board prayer and Pledge of Allegiance. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mrs. Adam Stafford. Ms. Booth Estrada.
Present.
Mr. Briggs.
Present.
Mr. Saron Ruiz.
Here.
Mr. Fields.
Present.
Mr. Jackson. Mrs. LaSalle Frazier. Dr. J. Miller. Dr. Z. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Murray. Mr. Valentine. Ms. Walker.
Present.
Ms. Mickens-Murray.
Present. Thank you. Colleagues, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda for the April 13, 2023 board work session? May I have a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. The board will hear public comments from speakers on agenda and non-agenda items. Public comment guidelines for registered speakers. To the registered speakers, you have been registered to speak in a public comment forum where the Board of Education will listen to your comments. The board will not address your comments. All registered speakers will have 3 minutes to make their presentations. Registered speakers may not relinquish any part of their speaking time to another registered or unregistered individual. Speakers may not address individuals or issues with profanity or derogatory terms. You will be warned once. If you continue, your comments will be muted and you may be removed from the meeting. Speakers are encouraged to use titles rather than names. For example, principal, CEO, chair, board member, etc. Your adherence to these guidelines will enable the public participation process to move smoothly. There is one confirmed public live speaker comment tonight. Our speaker is Shannon Reed, individual, teacher retention. I do not see Ms. Reed. Moving on, we did not receive any written comments or pre-recorded videos for this board work session. I will now yield the floor to Dr. Monica Golson to present agenda item, special education.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our Associate Superintendent for Special Education, Trinell Bowman, and of course our Chief of Academics who oversees and supports her, Dr. Judith White. So we will now hear from Ms. Bowman for the special education presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity, Board Chair and Board members and Dr. Golson to present the special ed presentation this evening. I appreciate the support that I received from my supervisor, Dr. Judith White, and I appreciate your commitment to making sure that we are improving outcomes for students with disabilities. Our session outcomes tonight is for us to provide you with an update of our special education demographic data, provide highlights of how the special ed department supports specially designed instruction for our students, provide information on how the department monitors the implementation of individualized education programs known as IEPs, and then to provide you with information on the Department of Special Education approach to professional learning and training for our district. So thinking about Prince George's County and our demographics, these are the students that we serve. This is just a highlight that breaks down our data from birth to 21. So in Maryland, we do serve students from birth to 21 years of age. Our total special ed population is 16,355. This data is as of March 14th, 2023. And you'll see how that demographic data breaks down between birth to age 5, elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. I also provided you with our special education self-contained program location chart just so that you have an opportunity to peruse where our special ed programs are located throughout our district. When we think about our infants and toddlers, these are our children who are birth to 3. They are serviced under what we call an individualized family service plan. We have 3 categories of eligibility for that particular student group, and you can see how those eligibility categories break down. Again, as of March 14th, we were serving 1,430 children. Maryland is very unique. We're one of 3 states that allow a parent, when a child turns 3, parents can decide to move towards an individualized education program if the student meets eligibility, or they can choose to stay on an extended IFSP or individualized family service plan. The difference between an IFSP and an IEP is that an IFSP is really based on a coaching model for the parent, and so we're actually coaching the parent on how to provide and support their students based on specific outcomes in academics, behavior, social, emotional. We serviced 172 students as of March 14th, with those parents electing to do the extended IFSP option. When we look at our early childhood services in terms of where those services are being provided, this slide just provides you with our various descriptions of where students are being served. The federal law does require us to provide services in a student's least restrictive environment, and so these are the 6 different locations in which students are serviced in Prince George's County, with the majority of them being at our early childhood centers in separate classrooms at 32.3%. For students who are ages 3 through 21, these are students who are served under an IEP. And again, I provided you with our top 4 data points in the circle graph. 35% of our students in Prince George's County are students with specific learning disabilities who are served under an IEP, and that means that they're impacted in the area of reading, writing, or mathematics. The next largest category are students with autism. And then the next behind that are students with developmental delay, and then other health impaired. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, I did provide you with the breakdown of the number of students for every disability category, just so you have that as a reference. When we look at our K-12 students with disabilities, the majority of them are serviced in our general education classrooms. At 73.42%, and we're definitely very proud of that number. Historically, Prince George's had not met that target for many, many years, and about 3 years ago, we were actually able to meet that target. So we definitely are very proud of that particular indicator. And we know that the research shows that students with disabilities who are educated along general education students have better academic outcomes and achievements. And so now I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about our special ed strategic plan, which many of you are familiar with. that we created a four-year strategic plan that really is anchored in three goal areas. The first goal is really looking at how we are providing services for our special education students. The second goal is really anchored around implementing our general supervision and monitoring process for IEPs. And then the third area is how we provide professional learning, training, and coaching to really build our teachers' capacity to support students with disabilities and to implement specially designed instruction. For the purposes of this evening's presentation, we're going to spend our time looking at our areas of Goal 2 and Goal 3 of our strategic plan. For this year, we really have focused on pushing, Dr. Gosen has pushed us to think innovatively across our district. So one of the things that we are doing is piloting what we're calling a tiered systems of support for 12 different schools across the district, elementary, middle, and high, to really look at how we can provide services differently from central office to our schools. Knowing that all schools are not created equal, we want to be able to customize the support and differentiate that support based on what we call a special ed report card that has key data metrics that we look at from a compliance and a performance standpoint. We'll have more information to share with you at the conclusion of this school year, and we're working with Hanover Research to help with our focus group interviews as well as our survey data collections. The other piece we're looking at as a strategic focus this year is really how we support students with autism, social, emotional, behavior needs, and specific learning disabilities by really anchoring and maximizing our partnerships with our community partners. The third area we're focusing on is working with our curriculum and instruction partners to really look at our evidence-based strategies that can be lifted in our curriculum frameworks. We know that one of our priority focuses is mathematics, and so we'll be working closely to make sure that when our curriculum frameworks are released, that we have a keen focus on thinking about different learner characteristics and what may be best for those individual students to learn particular mathematical practices and standards. The last area is we're working with our testing, research, and evaluation department to really look at how we evaluate the quality of services throughout our district for students with autism, social, emotional, and specific learning disabilities. So again, more to come around that particular area of focus. When we think about supporting our students with disabilities, we really look at that through the lens of what we call specially designed instruction. That makes our students unique and special when they have an IEP. When we think about specially designed instruction, we're really thinking about the content that we provide to students, the methodology, and the delivery of instruction. We want to make sure that we're meeting the unique needs of our students because every student has an individualized IEP. So when we think about specially designed instruction, we're thinking of things like interventions that are provided to the student, accommodations, supplementary aids and services, program modifications, related services, and supports. It's important that we provide this so that students can have access to the general education curriculum and be able to make gains and progress. When we think about the ways that we support our students, we support them in 5 key ways across our district. The first piece is through our curriculum resources that we develop. And so I'm happy to share with you that in our 4 core content areas of English, mathematics, science, and social studies, we have developed an instructional planning considerations document that really drives the work between our general ed and special ed teachers as it relates to collaborative planning. Kind of beginning with the end in mind, we know that there are several students with disabilities that may be in a classroom. So it's important that we really think about what those specific accommodations are, where they're aligned, where they're across different students in that particular class. And so we actually have leveraged this planning considerations document that really allows them to collaboratively plan and think about those accommodations that may need to be developed or provided. For number 2, we have intentional collaboration, and it's great that we're under our Chief Academic Officer because it really lends ourselves to having those collaborative conversations, both in our district meetings with our Chief Academic Officer as well as our cross-functional meetings. And we have intentional collaborations and plan training with our content experts in curriculum and instruction. The third area is through our professional learning, and you'll hear a little bit about that coming up in just a moment around how we look at our collaborative professional learning across our district through a variety of ways and strategies. Number 4 is through our high-level practices. This was done with the Cedar Center, as well as the Council for Exceptional Children. We know what works. We have a lot of research behind what works for students with disabilities. And so the Cedar Center, which is a national resource center for students with disabilities and teachers, as well as the Council for Exceptional Children, came up with 22 high-level practices that they said if districts implement, we will definitely begin to see gains for students. 3 of the areas that we're focusing on, you can't focus on all 22 at the same time. And so just looking at our data, the 3 areas that we're focusing on as a district this year is supporting teachers with case management duties, looking at explicit instruction, and scaffolding approaches. So those are our 3 high-level practices that we're looking at that came out of the Cedar Center. The other piece is our SCI Fidelity tool. This is a tool that we developed to really help kind of benchmark and baseline where teachers are. It's not meant to be part of the evaluation process at all. So we cannot use that as part of a teacher's evaluation process, but we really use it to look at where teachers are at the beginning of the school year with a variety of evidence-based strategies, practices, those 3 high-level practices I mentioned, and how those teachers are performing. And then we use that baseline data during the first quarter when we do observations to then go back and work with our principals and our school leaders at the schoolhouse to determine how we're going to build capacity of those teachers. We know, again, all teachers are not created equal, so we really tailor our coaching and training plan to really be able to support those teachers where we see that they're not making the mark based on expectations. And then we coach them through the year and then do a post kind of fidelity check at the end to see where the growth is, but then again, continuing to work and build for the next year. So those are just the 5 areas that we really support the implementation of specially designed instruction for our students in our district. As it relates to special ed interventions, we've come a long, long way with the interventions that we provide to our students, particularly in the area of reading, language arts. We work very closely with our school teams and reviewing their data. We spend the entire summer. We have a team that actually looks at all of the data in the summer around the interventions that school teams have proposed for the next school year so that we can make sure when teachers return in August, we're giving them that feedback to see if there's a connection between the data, the students' present levels in their IEP, and the intervention that has been selected. We have been doing this for 4 years. We're still not at a point where we feel comfortable to kind of let schools go of this process because we're still seeing some misalignment between the student's present level of need and the selections for the interventions. So for example, you may have a student that has difficulty with decoding words or areas of phonemic awareness or phonics, but then the school might have selected a reading comprehension intervention where we know we're never going to see growth. So that's just an example of why we continue to stay involved in supporting our schools. Of course, we cannot overrule an IEP team, but we do provide that information and ask the school teams to go back and reconvene with the parent to have further conversations. We also look at the implementation process with our schools, so we provide office hours. We leverage our Canvas to provide intervention resource hubs. We also provide training and resources to our teachers. We look at the alignment to the IEP goals and objectives, and then we do individual coaching and fidelity checks as well. When we look at our intervention monitoring, we really have tiered those schools that are utilizing the special ed interventions into kind of 3 categories. If they're in the green, they're good to go. We do less checks on them because we have high usage. We don't have any concerns around that. But we then have kind of what we call our caution schools and schools that are in the red, where we're providing definitely more support and hands-on coaching with analyzing data, having biweekly monitoring and usage, and then in some cases, we do have schools that we do support through an action plan to make sure that, again, students are utilizing their interventions. When we think about supporting school-based staff through professional learning, I just wanted to share the approach that the Department of Special Education has taken. And we look at this professional learning approach in 5 different areas, really around how we are supporting, coaching, mentoring. It's very important for us that anytime we roll out training, we always make sure that we have a follow-up coaching component, because what we know and what the research shows us is that if you're just kind of doing a one-and-done training and not going back into the classroom and following up. Sometimes our teachers do not generalize that information or implement it. So it's very important that we do a coach and mentor approach in terms of supporting our teachers. We also develop and make sure that we have training modules for our special educators, chairs, coordinators, and administrators that's really tailored to their role. An administrator role in the IEP process is very different than a teacher's role, and so we make sure that we tailor our training to speak and address those particular areas of our user groups. We collaborate, again, very intentionally around our curriculum and instruction partners to make sure that we are on the forefront of providing the best professional learning experiences. We also facilitate the professional learning, so we develop it, but we also facilitate the delivery of that, and then we have to manage our professional learning through our eDoctrina learning platform. So I'll just break down these areas a little bit more for you. When we think about develop, again, we have 3 different groups that we're looking at: our administrators, principals and assistant principals, support staff, which is our paraprofessionals and our itinerant special education assistants, and then our general and special educators. How we do it is we leverage our Google Classrooms, Canvas, Victor Solutions, and then we do a variety of asynchronous and synchronous training, as well as after-school paid training. We do have some limited, very limited face-to-face trainings that we do implement for non-classroom-based staff members. You can see here the number of sessions that we have provided to date for asynchronous, and we've had over 17,000 participants for 168 sessions. And then for our synchronous training, we have them broken down between required trainings and optional, and the required trainings go out via a memo from Dr. White each year of what modules are actually required. And then you could see the number of sessions and the number of participants for the synchronous that's indicated in red. For our support, in terms of we really want to build the capacity of our special educators and our coordinators and our chairpersons. They are our future leaders in special education. So we definitely have a very intentional focus on that particular group. We have monthly chairperson meetings with them. We have after-school clinics where we're developing their leadership capacity. And then we have school-based presentations that we actually meet individually with those school teams that are part of our STARS program, which is our special education leadership program. For collaboration, in terms of who we do it with, we work with our curriculum and instruction office, very closely aligned in those 4 content areas you see listed here. We also work very closely with our Office of Professional Learning and Leadership to really look at our resident teacher program and how we can support those teachers, as well as our special education mentors. And then we also partner with our Equity and Inclusion Office to really look at our culturally responsive teaching, particularly as it relates to students with disabilities. For facilitating our areas, again, we believe instruction is paramount, and so a lot of our training is focused around specially designed instruction. We know that we still have to do compliance, but we also know that if we take care of instruction and provide instruction with fidelity around specially designed instruction, that we know compliance will take care of itself. But we do have focuses and modules on compliance as well as social emotional behavior. And then again, you could see the PLO participation from August to February on the right-hand side. In terms of managing, we do a lot of management with eDoctrina. We have to create the courses, the descriptions, we have to schedule them, and then we have to do the registration and attendance for our participants that are attending. We've offered 149 courses so far between August and February. And these are the professional learning categories in which we provide our trainings. Now I'm going to take you through our special education monitoring systems and structures. We, again, as part of our Goal 2 of our strategic plan, we do have several systems and structures in place, and I'm going to highlight some of that with data today for you. As it relates to our general supervision for continuous improvement, the Maryland State Department of Education always monitors us programmatically and fiscally. So depending on how we're performing determines how frequently we are monitored. For example, our infants and toddlers program is only monitored every 4 years programmatically and fiscally, Whereas our Part B, which is our school-age students, ages 3 through 21, we're monitored now every 2 years versus every year. When we think about Prince George's County Public Schools and looking at it from a programmatic lens, we've developed a monthly accountability special ed checklist that's reviewed with principals or their designee on a monthly basis with our special education instructional specialists that really documents for every month the key special ed processes and procedures that should be followed and checked off. Then we also have our special ed monitoring plan, which you're going to hear a little bit about that this evening. We also manage our fiscal resources, and we have that for general funds and restricted funds, and you'll hear a little bit about that. For our IEP desk audits, we do a random selection of students across our district. So for every school, we monitor a minimum of 2 IEPs, and we also monitor our non-public programs as well. We do a record review, and we actually use the same rubric that the Maryland State Department of Education uses. It's very important that we monitor ourselves the same way the state monitors us, so that when we're looking at our comparative data, it lines up with how the state is looking at us as well. For this year, our monitoring occurred between November and March. So the results I'm going to share with you are fresh off the press. This is our 3-year trend data for our self-monitoring. Again, this is our central office team members and other school leaders under second assignment that monitor. We have about 50 people that actually are part of our monitoring process because there's over 50 indicators that we look at when we're actually monitoring our IEPs. You'll see that for present levels for appropriate areas, this is making sure that when we look at our assessment results, that the IEP represents those areas of need through the present levels. And so we are happy that we definitely significantly increased from last year, school year to this school year, with 92% of our IEPs meeting that indicator. However, we do recognize we still have work to do around how the disability impacts and being able to write that information in the IEP, a student's involvement in general ed, as well as the IEP goals being measurable. We're happy that our IEPs that we did monitor this year had 100% for our behavior needs, meaning that the teams are recognizing the behavior needs as we look at functional behavior assessments, that we're able to say that the IEP teams did consider those behavior needs of students. For our IEP team process, we are still working with our school teams to make sure we have appropriate team members at IEP meetings. The biggest area in which we sometimes do not have compliance is with the general education teacher being at our IEP meetings. And so that's something that we're really focusing on with our school teams to make sure that if a student is in general ed, that we have a general education teacher that's at the IEP meeting. Results of assessment is another area that we're working hard on, and this really just means that on the IEP that we've documented the assessment results if a student has participated in a statewide assessment in one of those tested grades. We're happy that 3 years in a row we're continuing to have 100% compliance with our transition plan. In Maryland, we write those at 14, and this really indicates what's going to happen with post-secondary outcomes when a student leaves us, when they exit and graduate from Prince George's County Public Schools. For our percentage of IEP goals with sufficient progress for quarter 1, 82.5% of our teams indicated that students are making sufficient progress on the progress report. For quarter 2, we were at 81.3%, and then quarter 3, we're still synthesizing that data, and we'll have that available probably in May. I'm going to go through now our support and related services monitoring. When we look at our support and related services, and these are things such as assistive technology, vision services, speech and language services, we look at an annual percentage of 4% by each discipline that is represented, and you'll see that in just a moment in the next few slides. And then we do a random selection based on that 4% of 25% of students to be looked at, making sure that they are receiving their services. The way that we look at services is that each service provider has to complete what we call a service log in Maryland online in the IEP system and upload that as verification that that service has been provided. So when we're doing our audits, that's what we're looking for, and that's what the state looks for when they monitor us. So as you can see, all of our areas were at 100% on this particular slide, with the exception of vision services, and that is due to our vacancies that we currently have. We currently have 3 vision teachers of the visually impaired vacancies. Currently, we do have a plan, of course, to make up those services as appropriate, and that's why you see the 69% for Q1 compliance and 67%. That means that those services were not met at 100%, and that's what we would expect to see if all positions are filled. For our other areas, for speech and language, we have about 25% a vacancy rate there for speech and language services across our district. That yields about 900 students that are impacted by our vacancies. Again, we do have a plan to make up those services and working with our parents. And for those 900 students that have been impacted, we have sent out letters to those families, giving them options of how those services can be made up and allowing parents and families to make a choice. Occupational therapy, as well as audiology, are also impacted because of our vacancies. But again, we do have a plan to make up those services. For orientation and mobility, for Q2, I do want to note that that data point only reflects about 1 student that was in that data pool, and we only have roughly about 18 students across our district that receive orientation and mobility at this time. And then physical therapy, again, was impacted by some vacancies or documentation not being uploaded timely. And so we do make sure that if services, the documentation is not uploaded, we do go back to those service providers where there's not a vacancy issue, and make sure that they upload the service log, because in our opinion, if the service log is not there, we are non-compliant. For secondary transition planning, again, we're happy to report that we are at 100%. And this is a federal reporting piece around our state performance indicator. And so all districts are responsible for indicator 13, which is the secondary transition plan, and we have to be 100% in compliance. When we look at our indicator 13 data for Q1, we reviewed 56 IEPs. 100% of them were in compliance. For Q2, we reviewed 803 IEPs, and 100% of them were in compliance. And then for Q3, we have about 1,200 to review, and their team is still working through that data, and then we'll be also doing Q4. The next area that we monitor is functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans. Again, this is aligned with Administrative Procedure 5062, which is our student behavior interventions. And we want to make sure that we support our students who are in need of those functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans. We conduct desk audits for them with our central office. We have a behavior support team from central office that actually does the reviews. Those are the team members that actually support our schools with referrals and case reviews when students are having difficulties, or help coach team members on data collection and how to develop behavior intervention plans. We do look at all school types, so from preschool to our non-public programs, and we actually use the MSDE FBA BIP rubric when conducting our reviews. This is our 3-year trend data for our functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans. You can see our baseline year for the first year of monitoring this area was in 2021, and you can see for 22-23, we definitely have made gains in every category that's listed here. Definitely one of the areas that we're still working through is teams recognition when a student needs a functional behavior assessment. So what warrants when a student has interfering behaviors? How frequently are you seeing them? When should you convene an IEP meeting to get consent from a parent? That's an area that we're still working with our school teams on to make sure that they're holding those IEP meetings and getting consent to conduct those functional behavior assessments that then yields if we need to develop a behavior intervention plan. So that's an area we're definitely still working on, as well as the IEP goals aligned to the target behaviors. What we expect to see is that the target behaviors in your behavior intervention plan would be aligned to your IEP goals in your social emotional behavior section of the IEP. So that's an area that we definitely are still targeting and working on. The last area I will share with you this evening around our programmatic Monitoring is physical restraint and seclusion. Please note, in Prince George's County Public Schools, seclusion is prohibited. However, in our non-public programs, seclusion is still allowed, so I did want to draw that distinction for you. This particular monitoring is aligned to the recent Senate Bill 786 that came out last year, as well as our COMAR regulations, and then our Administrative Procedure 5062. For our physical restraint, we do a monthly pull. Each school has a discipline manager that is required to enter any restraints that are found, that are done at a school. They have to enter those into School Max within 24 hours. So we work with our School Max team to pull a monthly pull of all of the restraints. We also work with our principals through our area office to make sure that they're verifying the data. So after we pull the monthly data, we then send that data out quarterly to principals for them to actually verify their physical restraint data. The majority of our schools do not have physical restraints, and I can also share that the majority of our physical restraints are at the elementary level. We collect the documentation and send those reports out, and then we look at that documentation, look for trends and patterns, and then work individually with those schools to address any areas of concern that was shown in the auditing. This is our physical restraint from 1920 to currently, and you could see what our restraint data looks like. We have declined this year so far. This data is as of 2/28/23. Where we've had about 63 physical restraints for this school year. The 2021 school year is the year, of course, we were out for COVID, and we continue to monitor and provide training. This is the one area where we do provide daily school-based daily training on, which is our Crisis Prevention Institute. 80% of that training is around how to de-escalate that student, but if we have to physically intervene, that is a component of that training that we provide to our school teams. And each team requires a 5-member behavior crisis team that is trained and can respond to a student who may be having interfering or escalating behaviors. So after our IEP monitoring is completed, again, we share those results with principals to look for trends, patterns, and improvement areas. Meetings may need to be scheduled based on our findings with the IEP audit. We also provide professional learning and coaching. And so as we look to adjust our modules for next year, we look at those patterns and trends to make sure that when we address our synchronous and asynchronous modules, we make sure we make those updates. And then our central office team members may reach out to IEP team members for information that we did not see in the audit. So one of the key pieces we look for, as an example, is that the IEP team sign-in sheet has been uploaded in our Maryland online system. If we see that that was missing for any of our students, we work with the school team to make sure that that document is uploaded, as an example. And then, of course, for our related services, if there are any makeup services that are warranted, we look at that and we make sure that we have a plan to address those makeup services if, in fact, they were not done. For fiscal monitoring, we have a business operations coordinator that really works with our financial team to really look at our oversight for general funds, restricted funds, staffing, and our financial dashboard. We do meet monthly with the budget office and our grants management team to really review staffing, our restricted budget, our general fund budget, and then our maintenance of effort, which is the level of funding that we have to maintain from year to year. We also do our staffing monitoring with human resources, so we do have monthly collaborative meetings with our Department of Human Resources. We participate in the MSDE audit, which is really looking at the triennial pieces of your restricted funds, equipment, staffing, written policies and procedures to make sure that we are in alignment with federal and state requirements. We also have our comprehensive annual financial report, where we look at, again, our financial reporting, staffing, and equipment, and then our A133 audit that's done annually around our federal grants, written policies, and procedures. The next piece that I'm excited to share as our wrap-up this evening is our business intelligent data dashboards. We have really done a great job. Our team has done a tremendous work in really being able to monitor special education from our business intelligent dashboard, and I'm just going to highlight some of that information for you now. Our business intelligence refers to the data that collects, or our system that collects and analyzes our data in actual transitory time. So as we're sitting here, we can pull reports on where we are performing in a variety of categories as a district. These reports have been developed to really assist our school teams with self-monitoring themselves and maintaining compliance and performance indicators. We as a special ed leadership team also uses these reports to monitor for indicators and compliance. So I can tell you at any given time what schools are performing in what way based on the reports that we have. And then the other piece that I do is work with my special ed supervisors to drill down to which specialists are assigned to their schools, because we also look at patterns and trends with our own staff and how they are supporting our schools. This is a list of our BI dashboards and reports. We have over 65 reports that we can pull. It's very exciting because we did not have this 3 years ago. And so each year we continue to build more reports that can help us with error reports for student services. We look at our extended school year. We have dashboards for non-public, our public. We look at other special ed reports that I'm just going to highlight for you in just a moment, as well as monthly reports. We do send out monthly term reports to our principals directly, as well as our instructional directors and associate superintendents. They also use these data to help monitor and support their schools. And so monthly, there are certain reports that we do send out to our school teams to help guide them and support them with our special ed data. And so you were provided with a handout in your packet. I'm just going to walk you through some of the examples of our BI dashboard. Again, we have 65 different reports. I just wanted to highlight a few for you for this evening. One of the reports that we're able to pull is students who are going to graduate with a certificate or diploma. We do have students as young as elementary school students who are participating in our ALT framework, where we are targeting them to graduate with a certificate, and so we do review that data, as well as our diploma data, both for non-public and public students, so we're able to have a snapshot of that as an example report. The other report we have as an example is our evaluations that are coming due, and we look at this in 30-day increments, 60-day increments, and 90-day increments. So when this monthly report goes out to our school principals and our area office, instructional directors and associate superintendents, they're able to look to see what evaluations are coming due in 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days as a planning tool, but we also provide them with any evaluations that are showing overdue. We must have evaluations done, at least at a minimum. Teams must convene every 3 years to determine if a student needs additional assessments or if they continue to qualify as a student with a disability. We do ask our special ed chairs and coordinators and psychologists to meet at the beginning of the year to plan out their calendar for the entire year based on the students that they have at their school. But this is just another tool to help with that planning and making sure that they're staying in compliance. We also have our IEPs in terms of annual reviews. Again, we look at those IEPs that are coming due in 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, and what IEPs may be overdue. The other thing that we've worked with our area office to be able to do is our instructional directors can drill down by their specific cluster, and then our associate superintendents can drill down by Area 1, Area 2, and Area 3 and see their schools at a high level as well. So that's something else we built into the tool. And then we continue with our monthly trend data, so we're able to look at a trend from one school year over the next in terms of what schools are continuing to stay in the green and which schools may have concerns around expired IEPs, and then how we can leverage and support them around that. We also have a report that I shared around our special ed progress report, where I did highlight that data with you this evening, and this is something that we collect on a quarterly basis around our special ed progress report. And then the last one I just shared with you was just a snapshot of kind of what our dashboard looks like. So we're able to see on a monthly basis our snapshot of data around how many students are enrolled in Prince George's County, how many students are in non-public, how many students have been determined eligible for ESY, how many students are on track for a diploma, et cetera. So that's just kind of how an example of one of our data dashboards that I wanted to share. So that concludes my presentation this evening, and so I welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you so much for that most comprehensive presentation. I have a couple of questions, but I'll wait until we go around the room. I need to ask if Ms. Shauna Reed, who was our one speaker, someone entered the room, so we wanted to make sure. Okay, we just wanted to make sure that we were not ignoring someone. All right, thank you. Board members, we're open for discussion, and I see the first person was Board Member Boozer-Struther.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Bowman, for the excellent presentation. I did want to just specifically note and thank you for how you serve families monthly. And I believe you're the only academic division in our county and, of course, in the state that is required to have this oversight of community involvement monthly, and every month, and I try to attend at least every other month, and you invite board members in, advocates, the public, and every month your staff produces some of the most in-depth information that is useful to parents and to policymakers, board members, elected officials that I don't think any other division chief is required to do. So I did want to acknowledge that. And right now you have some incredible programming going on, and I wanted to ask if you might share some of those resources, the monthly meeting and the parent conference that's happening right now.
Absolutely. So we are having, each month, we do have our Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, and we set that agenda in the summer of what those topics are going to be. We also have going on right now a support group for parents that really focuses on behavior, social emotional behavior needs of students in the home, and really working with parents through those processes around task analysis, how students can remain compliant at home, helping with visual schedules, and the like. This Saturday, we will have an autism summit at John Carroll from 8 to 1:30 in honor of our Autism Awareness Month. And so we will have a variety of workshops. We've partnered with a variety of community organizations to help support that Autism Summit. Last night, I was actually at Fairmont Heights High School where we did our college and career fair for special education families. It was well attended. We had over 125 attendees. Both students with their families came out for that college and career fair. And then we have our Deaf and Hard of Hearing support group where we are supporting our parents each month through that particular topic. So we do a lot of outreach with our families. We provide family resources in terms of a monthly newsletter that goes out, as well as our community resource list of all community agencies and organizations that can support them. And that resource has been well received from our family and community members. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I've attended some of the guest expert sessions as well. And it's, the top, when I look around, they are the top experts. And I think we as a board can amplify who you're bringing to our families. And I think we can do more to market that and all the great work that you're doing. I wanted to ask about, I was looking at the strategic plan goal around reducing non-public placement. And I wanted, if you could explain more about what is the really visible way that families in our school community will see that. And I think I'm trying to get my head around it too. Like the one thing that I assume is the new autism program with the new building of Hyattsville Middle. Like that is a really tangible, visible way to show what we're doing and change and funding, I assume, from the blueprint. So if you could just talk more about that.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we know in special ed, we always have to have a continuum of services. So we definitely always will have to have non-public programs. But when we did the analysis of our data, there were two populations that we were sending out the most to our non-public programs, and that was children with autism and students with social emotional needs. And so that's why we have targeted those two groups. And we're not saying that those students may not need to go to non-public, but when we look at our budget of $60 million. That was something that we really wanted to focus on reducing, and how can we bring students closer to home and provide them with similar services in our public school system than they have, because many of our students stay on the bus an hour and a half to 2 hours getting to non-public schools. And so when you think about a daily travel, that can be 4 hours for some of our students. And so we're really working hard to be able to bring, to lessen those referrals, to be able to service some of those students in our own school community. The other thing that we have done is we started a new autism extensions program. These are students who traditionally would have been served by community reference instruction, or CRI, or students who are on the alternate framework who would graduate with a certificate. And so that program, we've had wonderful success. We started that program with a partnership with Ivy Mount and funding from the state to do what we call a preventative partnership, to see if we brought in board-certified behavior specialists in our district, would we have a decrease in the referral. And I'm happy to report that when we look at our autism extensions program that's now been in place for 3 years, we've only had to refer 1 student out. And so that's just showing and demonstrating that the program is working. And the model that we're using is a similar model that Kennedy Krieger uses up in Baltimore, that's based on a TEACH framework out of Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's just an example of how we're trying to, again, leverage our funding and resources to support students closer to home.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have Board Member Juanita Miller. Dr. Miller?
I'm smiling because, as you know, I spent 12 years with the Prince George's County Public Schools System Special Ed, and left in non-public. And I'm telling you, this strategic plan is one of the future. And I think Prince George's County, is at the top of serving our special needs populations. And I congratulate you and your team and your leadership. I had some questions, but Pam asked one of the questions in terms of non-public, and you just said that has decreased, which is great, because that was, as I saw it, that took a lot out of our budget. But I can't say anymore. The questions that I may have really been addressed, but I have to let everybody know this is top of the line. And thank you, Dr. White, Dr. now my memory, Dr. Golson, and the rest, and Ms. Bowman, Dr. Bowman as well. This is, I'm passionate about it, and I just had to say that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Mr. Fields?
Well, first, Dr. Bowman, thank you for that presentation. It was truly informative about a student population that I think educators across the country are challenged to make sure that they're receiving a high-quality education. I had a couple of questions, and I think Board Member Boozer-Struther really touched upon the first part, family support, because I'm really interested in seeing how we can examine lessons learned and apply them to the entire student population. Family engagement is always difficult, and it seems as though you have found a way to do it effectively, that we need to see if we can apply some of those lessons to the overall student population. My only real question is on a slide that you had on restraints, where the majority of restraints were elementary school level. Does that number represent singular incidents, or are there individuals that there might be multiple incidents?
So based on the state COMA regulations, we have to report single incidents. So if a student had 2 restraints in the same day, that would be 2 incidents, considered 2 incidents.
Okay. And we know which students there are multiple incidents, so when it comes for interventions, we address that.
Yes, absolutely. And part of our administrative procedure does require us to make sure that an IEP team meeting's convened. So there's other steps as part of the monitoring that you didn't see me communicate, but it is in our administrative procedure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Dr. Zipporah Miller?
Good evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Golson, Dr. White, and Ms. Bowman, I would be remiss if I didn't say this because my colleagues have already. But in February and March, I went to every school in my district. And one of the things that I heard resounding all the time from parents were, you know, my child has an IEP, we really feel supported. The staff is very supported. I know how to support my child. So I just want to ensure that I bring that back to you, that all the work you're doing is paying off, because parents are even speaking about it, you know, without even asking. That's one of the things that resoundingly I heard from school to school, that my child has an IEP or we're receiving special education services, and the staff is supported, but just coupled with family support for parents to say, I know how to support my child. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Board Member Valentine.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. Excuse me if any of the questions that I asked were addressed before I got here. And so the areas that I've, in the time I've been here, there are two particular areas that I get the most questions from parents. One is diagnosis or misdiagnosis of their children. So talk about the process of getting a child evaluated, but also throughout their time in our system, how they're reevaluated to determine where they fit. Second question is to my colleague, Dr. Poor-Miller's point. I often get contact with parents saying their child's IEP is not being met. And so just talk about the process for parents who do have that concern, the process for ensuring that their IEP is being met. Similarly, there's been concern in the past about particularly non-English speaking parents who struggle, particularly at IEP meetings when an interpreter's not there, and the process. And my last question, particularly around our special education teachers. So where are we at with regard to recruitment and retention of educators who teach that population? Particularly, I was at Bowie State University earlier this week speaking to a class, and whether there is a push, particularly from our side, to encourage undergraduate education students, particularly men of color, to think about this as a profession. And so talk about, sort of the diagnosis, how they ensure they're getting their services, but also language services and recruitment and retention of educators. Thank you.
Okay. So for the first one, in terms of evaluation, if a student is suspected to have a disability, the parent can put that request in writing to the school team, who would then consider that request through the IEP team process. The other piece of that is once a student is found eligible for services, we do have to do a reevaluation every 3 years at a minimum, but that does not stop us from looking at a student a year and a half if we see a significant change in their progress or things that may be going on with that particular student. And so at a minimum, we have to reevaluate them every 3 years. I think the other piece of that is we work very closely with our school psychologists who are our experts around looking at different assessment instruments that we use in terms of diagnosis. But then it's also an IEP team, so it's a collaborative approach. So it's not just your school psychologist that's administering a cognitive assessment. You have your educator, your special educators that's doing like a Woodcock-Johnson for the educational piece. If we suspect that a student has mobility issues, we may be bringing in the physical therapist to do an assessment. If we think the student may have articulation, fluency, or language issues, we're bringing in that speech and language. So basically all the areas of suspected impact, we bring those particular team members to the table, and we do have a discussion around what we're seeing for students. At any point in time, a parent, if they have concern with the disability that has been given, they can request a meeting, and we will reconvene and look at that data with the family. In some cases, we have involved central office reviews when there's been a question or a concern, and so we will involve our supervisor of psychological services as well as our supervisors of related services, et cetera, to take a look at the data that was used to make that decision and give feedback. So we definitely look at that. Again, if a child has a suspected disability, a teacher or a parent or even a community or doctors, particularly pediatricians, may have concerns, they can make that referral. So we do have a child find process that we do follow, that we're required by law to follow. If we suspect a student has a disability, and then once they have an IEP, we do have to reevaluate them a minimum of every 3 years, or more frequent if we have a concern. In terms of the IEP not being met, if our Family Support Center, or my office, or even Dr. Golson's office, or Dr. White's office, if any email correspondence comes into the district from a family member, we do take those seriously. We do follow up based on what is indicated in that communication, may require us to do a record review for that individual student. And in some cases, we've had to do what we call similarly situated. We look at every student with an IEP at that school. And so we do investigate those matters. We have a compliance team that looks at that along with our special ed supervisors to determine what the concern may be. When we think about IEP services, there's a full range. Is it about services for related services not being met? Is it about progress not being made? So we have to look at kind of what that concern is and then follow up accordingly to do that review. And ultimately bring that IEP team back together to discuss that concern that a parent has shared and follow up accordingly. Jennifer Love's office has done a great job. She's our translation office in providing guidance to our special educators and principals around the process they should follow when requesting an interpreter. And so we do have a very fluid process, step by step, which schools should do when they need to request an interpreter for an IEP meeting. We do not want that to be a barrier for any parent in terms of being able to have access. And so we do have a process that school teams do follow with requesting an interpreter. So we should not, have a parent showing up to a meeting without an interpreter. There is a timeline to get an interpreter, so they do ask for a 72-hour notice to make sure that we're fulfilling those requests, but they do a phenomenal job meeting that interpreter need throughout our district. And then in terms of teacher recruitment, I can tell you my team has personally been out at Howard, Bowie, and all districts trying to recruit. Even looking at students who may want to be a paraprofessional because they're taking evening classes. We've been able to successfully recruit that way. But we do partner directly with our Department of Human Resources through a variety of ways. We have some team members that actually go out on recruitment. So they go, they have a budget where they allow our team members to fly or drive to other institutions across the country to be able to recruit. When we think about our hard to fill, like teachers of the visually impaired, speech and language, we know the producers of those graduates, and so we do work directly with our Department of Human Resources to do recruitment fairs, word of mouth. As Dr. Baldwin, our Chief of Human Resources, always says, we're all ambassadors, so we do recruit as we see fit and work real closely with our Office of Professional Learning and Leadership through MOUs, through a variety of universities to be able to get students in.
Thank you. We will now have Board Member Brandon Jackson.
Hey, good evening. My question was, when you talked about, so every 3 years, the student will be retested. And so my question is, so let's just say that the student is doing well, and it's time for he or she to return back to the general population of students. What services are there to assist the children with that transition?
So we do have a process where students are exited because part of their evaluation process could mean that they have met significant progress where they no longer require an IEP. In some cases, we may refer to the 504 team because maybe they just need accommodations and not necessarily specially designed instruction. If you look at the accommodations for students with an IEP or 504 plan, they're very similar. They're identical. So if a student really just needs accommodation, sometimes that can be met through a 504 plan. And in some cases, a student could exit special ed without needing any services. And then if they become and when they become a general education student, we also have our student instructional team or a student support team process where students can be reviewed for interventions, et cetera, even as a general education student. So there are supports that will be available like our, like general education students, because they too can receive interventions as an example. But there is exit criteria, very strict criteria we have to follow in order to exit a student with an IEP.
Thank you. Board Member LaSalle Frazier.
Thank you so much. I have two questions. I'm wondering about how do we as a district work on identifying our twice exceptional students and what kind of services do we provide for them? And then the second question I have is in terms of how are we assuring that our teachers are aware of each of the students' accommodations, and how are we ensuring that they're following those accommodations? And I ask because a lot of parents, when speaking to them, they often talk about that the teacher often is not aware of accommodations that are needed for their specific student.
So thank you for those two questions. So we actually have a twice exceptional resource teacher in the Department of Special Education that works very closely with our talented and gifted coordinator in our district. So there is a screening process that we take our students through. We do provide training to our special ed chairpersons as well as coordinators of things to look for if a student may have twice exceptionality or signs that they may be demonstrating that they are gifted in that area. And we have a referral process. We do provide what we call 2E or twice exceptional services throughout our district. In Prince George's County, very similar to what our TAG students receive. So depending on what area they're in, they also have advanced placement classes they can take. They also have IB courses they can take. We also have what we call an academic resource class at the secondary level for middle and high school students. They could also go into that course to be able to receive some of their twice exceptional services through a twice exceptional teacher that we provide from special ed at the school level. And then for accommodations in terms of being aware at the beginning of the year, we do require our special ed case managers to provide what we call an IEP snapshot to all general education teachers. We also have our special education considerations planning document that's in all four of our core content areas of English, mathematics, science, and social studies. And in that particular considerations document, it goes over the process they should follow for students who have accommodations. We've also provided accommodation labels and stickers for school teams to utilize so that parents are aware, particularly for schoolwork, what accommodations are being provided. Some schools keep data charts as well. That is something that we look at when we're monitoring our programs around the use of accommodations as far as the fidelity tool that we use when we go into classrooms. That is something that we look for. And we also have created a look for document for our administrators also to use as they're doing informal and formal classroom visits.
Thank you. I have just one follow-up question. What's the caseload numbers for our case carriers?
So it does vary from elementary to middle, but typically, again, we're in a vacancy crisis right now, as you know, but typically at the secondary level, a teacher does not usually have over 30 students on their caseload. We did run an analysis report a couple years back, and we only had about 2 teachers that were outside of that 30 member caseload. And so at the elementary level, it's typically 15 or less.
Thank you. Board Member Adam Stafford.
Thank you so much, and actually my colleague took one of my questions. So I wanted to ask if you could share with me a bit more about where we are in terms of our push towards inclusion, specifically with students in our autism program. I think we had mentioned this in the Academic Achievement Committee a while back, and you were talking about some of the plans we had there. Additionally, I wanted to know, I didn't see this in the presentation, but I might have missed this, if you could share the percentage of students that we have that do exit our special education program. And then my other question was just, really what I hear mostly from parents and community members are really just about general education teachers that may not be aware of accommodations or how to support students with accommodations. And so maybe if you could just share a bit more about the professional development that you're offering. I see some of the after-school clinics here, and I've heard from teachers about the online resources they can take advantage of. But, you know, what other resources are we providing to general education teachers, especially thinking about some of the work that I know you all are doing with helping teachers get their dual certification in English in ESOL? Are we doing some of that with special education as well?
So for your first question in terms of inclusion, we are towards the end of our phase out of our comprehensive special education program at the elementary level. And so that was an intentional focus to provide general ed opportunities for those students to be fully included. When we look at our autism program at the secondary level, those students are in general education classes. They do have an academic resource class that supports them with their specific executive function or social skills needs that are part of their IEP. At the elementary level, typically for students in K through second grade, they are in self-contained classrooms. Beginning at grade 3, we really work intentionally to try to get them in general ed. So with the goal of by 5th grade, they are fully included in general ed classrooms so that they can prepare for middle school. So we do a different staffing configuration from grades 3 through 5, where we intentionally focus, and we meet quarterly with our autism principals to talk about strategies to foster inclusion and those inclusionary practices that we see across the nation. And we've been very successful, particularly with our 4th and 5th graders, getting them in general ed classrooms from our elementary autism programs. On the reverse side, when we think of students with significant cognitive disabilities, we also have worked to make sure that those students are included, particularly in the elective areas of art and music and PE as an example. So we're intentionally working with those team members. We've developed with our creative arts what we call a specially designed instruction handout for visual arts that really gives strategies to our visual art teachers as it relates to providing accommodations or specially designed instruction for those students that may be in their art, music, and PE classes. In terms of the exit data, that's something I would have to get back to you in terms of the percentage of students that exit, but that is a data point that I can follow up with you on. And then in terms of supporting the general education teachers, again, it's really through that planning and considerations document that we expect general ed and special ed teachers to be collaboratively planning together, specifically thinking about accommodations that need to be provided, and so that is intentional in our training. At the beginning of the year, one of our required modules is a training for general educators to go through in terms of thinking through accommodations, how they're implemented, what does it look like, and so that is a required module that we do take our general education teachers through at the beginning of the school year.
Thank you so much. Before we go to the second round, I have one question because my colleague, Mr. Valentine, asked you everything that I was going to ask, so that was good. On page 35, when you talked about percentage of students receiving 100% of the services, and then I see this drop, and then you shared that you are doing some other things. So can you share some of those things with us? Because it's really a distinctive drop here.
Sure. So for example, for our speech and language pathologists, we're at a 25% vacancy rate throughout the district. So we have provided options to families for those makeup services. It could be through what we call a second assignment speech and language pathologists that are providing those services in the evening or on the weekends. We also are going to have what we're calling speech clinics this summer, where parents could elect to send their child with transportation to those speech clinics. The third option is that a parent, if they so choose, could elect to find a speech and language pathologist on their own, and then Prince George's County will reimburse them. So those are kind of the three options that parents can utilize to be able to make up the speech and language services. The other services we definitely can make up in-house with our current staff.
Okay, that's helpful. And then finally, you mentioned 3 high-level practices. I was able to get 2 of them. I didn't get the third one, so could you share that one with me, please?
Yes, so the first is IEP case management, scaffolding approaches to teaching, and then the third is explicit instruction. So really working intentionally with the student, either one-on-one or a small group.
Okay, I appreciate that. So now we will go to, I think, second round, but let me make sure that somebody's in first round. Are you in the first round? Okay. So we'll go to Vice Chair Lolita Walker, first round.
You've been doing such an amazing job. I was just sitting here thinking that every time we have a work session, each of the professionals that come and answer all of our questions, you really get a sense, an acknowledgement of how well you all know your data. And so I just wanted to say thank you, because to sit on the other side and have to answer these detailed questions is a lot. So I'll keep mine to a minimum, because you've been doing so good. On, I don't know the page, page 42, this is about the functional behavior assessments and the behavior intervention plans. And my question, and it's okay if you get back to me, my question is really around, when I look at the jump from 2021 to 2022, we see significant growth, which I would expect given that we were in a pandemic, no worries. But then when I go over from 21 to 22 to 22 to 23, which we sit right now, I still see, you know, a number of, we have had growth, but I still see a number that is pretty low. And so my question is really around things like IEP team aligned IEP goal to our behavior intervention plans, target behaviors. I would want that to be really high, right? When I see that one, I'm anticipating that that one's going to be really high. And so I'm just hoping that you can maybe go back and take a look at what specifically are we doing to ensure that those writing the plans are very clear that these are the goals, right? And this is what we want to go to. So specifically around that one, then I was looking at the IEP team developed a BIP after determining needs. You can just take a look at the ones that's running pretty low. That would be really helpful to see, especially as we get ready to go into the next school year. Then the following, there's no help needed now, just if you could just go back and take a look at that. The other one is around behavior intervention specialist. How do we determine what schools that our behavioral intervention specialists are in? And then how do you make the determination on where they're going in future years? I asked this question because I've been asked this question, and because of, you know, the pandemic has really done a lot socially and emotionally to our children, our educators, et cetera, and some folks feel as though they don't have the right resources inside of school. Thanks. It was around how the behavior, okay, you got it.
So when we look at our assignments, so our SEED program, social emotional development program, those programs automatically get a crisis intervention resource teacher assigned to them. We are phasing in for our autism program, our crisis intervention resource teachers. Those programs are being phased in, so some of them have part-time certs. Once we completely phase out our CSEP program, those certs and that program will then be allocated to our autism programs. And we don't remove the cert from our CSEP program until every student is completely phased out. And then in terms of looking ahead as part of our strategic plan, we have added board certified behavior analysis specialists that work with our autism program. And then we also are leveraging contracted services in our district to bring in what we're calling behavior technicians. And again, those support our autism program. So that's how we look at that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. First round, Board Member Briggs.
Thanks so much, Chair Meekins Murray. And just want to apologize for anyone that's going to see me on camera. I literally thought that this was an internal working meeting, so apologies for my dress down. Ms. Bowman, I had a question for you that I wanted to ask, and this is really coming from my conversations with families in the district and community members around the types of supports that we offer around special education programs. So this is a very new one for me. I know of IEPs, but I didn't know of individualized family service plans, and was just curious if you could speak to how families take advantage of that, if they wanted that at their particular school, or if they felt that that was the better remedy for whatever their child's need was. So that's my first question. I would love it if you could answer it in like a minute or so, if possible.
So for our IFSP, or our individual family service plan, those are only provided to families who are in our infants and toddlers program. And so there is an eligibility process that we go through to determine if a student is eligible for those services under our infants and toddlers program. Again, from birth to 3, parents have to give consent for those services, so they do have to officially sign to have those services provided, and we actually go into families' homes to provide that service or that coaching model, or we go into a child care center as an example.
So for this program, this is the only option? Okay, great.
Yes.
All right, and then the next question was around the general supervision monitoring for continuous results approach, which just feels very technical, and was hoping that you could break it down to whatever extent you can here, and then I'm happy to have an offline with you if that's easier. But it just seems like there's the Maryland State Department of Education that's working with specifically Prince George's County and the office. Okay, so can you just kind of speak to
Sure.
the programmatic and the fiscal and like what that actually looks like, the work partnership that you all have?
So the Maryland State Department of Education, oversees all of our school districts in terms of making sure that we have, that we're meeting those performance and compliance indicators. So they have set forth targets that we have to meet. For example, least restrictive environment, how we educate students in the general education environment is a target. Looking at the secondary transition plan, making sure we're compliant is another target. Making sure that students have functional behavior assessments so that we get consent for those is another target. So when we look at it programmatically, it's really around how services are being rendered in that particular classroom setting for that individual student. And so when we think programmatically for special ed, it is a very, very large scope that we actually look at, everything from accommodations to speech and language services, physical therapist services. We look at how interventions are implemented. So all of those pieces make up kind of that programmatic aspect of our general supervision and monitoring.
So I guess my kind of follow-up there is like when these meetings are happening, is this with let's say, for example, this is my district and it's a school that has a specific need or issue. Are you pulling in a person that works on the SPED team from that school to have the discussion around Maryland State Department of Education's requirements around special education? Like, how does that actually work?
Yeah, so we actually meet with our principals and our special ed chair and coordinators on a monthly basis to review specific special ed processes and procedures and indicators. That's part of that accountability checklist. So those are typically where those conversations are happening around intervention needs of students. We're consulting with cases. Every school is assigned what we call a special education instructional specialist who has a designated set of schools that they are assigned to support. And then we provide a variety of resources, coaching. They can get consult from everything from, a student is struggling academically, they're not making progress on our IEP goals to behavior. So we have a team approach where we can come in and help problem solve with school teams around students who have IEPs. But they have a dedicated specialist from the Department of Special Ed that's assigned.
I'm gonna put my finger up here. So I appreciate that. And then I'm happy to get more information from you. The last question was around the speech and the language piece. So I have in my district, there are a few Afghani refugees that came in after everything that happened in 2021, as you all know, and there are significant challenges that some schools have around addressing those unique needs. That feels I'm not sure if that falls in the kind of bucket of what the special education office provides or not, but
That would be ESOL.
Okay, all right.
Our ESOL
okay.
office.
Okay, well then I'll leave that question there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now we're into the second round, and it will be Board Member Boozer-Struthers.
Thank you so much, Chair Mickens-Murray. I wanted to ask questions in 3 different areas that have kind of been, 2 of them have been themes since I've been on the board. One is teacher, special education staff stress around paperwork and other aspects of having, doing this job, and, sort of the trend data on, are we, I know we made some changes that if we say we go back to March 2020, that wouldn't be like the level exactly where we want to be. We want our teachers to be feeling like they do have more time for paperwork and are less stressed. And then they went through the pandemic, which was incredibly stressful. So I was wondering if you could just speak to some of the data on how we're doing there. And then the other is when I joined this board in 2019, you were doing some very specific work on disproportionality of discipline, and this may also be directed to Dr. Goldson, and the middle school program, and I wanted to hear you speak to also the trend data on that. And then the final is that I had noticed that MSD put out a grant application for over-identification of historically underserved population, and is the data that should we be applying for that grant? So those are the three areas I'd like to hear more on. Thank you.
So I do know as part of the negotiated agreement, our special education teachers have the 5-day planning that they can request throughout the year to help with that paperwork caseload management piece. Also, through our special ed staffing committee, there are some recommendations that we are looking at to be able to pilot and try to address the reduction of paperwork. I'm not prepared to share those recommendations yet because they have not been vetted through my chief yet, but there are some recommendations that we're looking at as we have benchmarked against other districts, both in our state and nationally, in terms of efforts that are being made to reduce kind of that paperwork load. So we are working through our special ed staffing committee, and there are some recommendations on the table that we would like to pilot in a small pilot to see if that yields the results that we're looking for. So that's one thing that I'll share with you. In terms of disproportionality, we are still a district that is in disproportionate status. I do not have the data here with me today, but I can follow up and get that to you. And we are applying for the Grant Rose over identification grant. We just had a meeting with our strategic planning and resource management office today who are supporting us with that grant application submission.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Board Member Brandon Jackson.
Thank you. So my question has to do with professional development. So is there any like standardized courses or requirements for teachers to identify children with learning disabilities or special needs? The reason why I ask because it's very important to me because I think I made it through K through 12 and then undergrad and grad school. I didn't get diagnosed to having a learning disability till I was 30, just a couple years ago. And so, which is crazy, right? I wish it could have got caught earlier. Maybe I would have been able to do some things differently, right? But so I just want to know, like, is there any professional development to help teachers identify students with special needs?
So the one thing about leveraging the Victor Solutions platform is we actually have recognizing the signs of a learning disability, recognizing the signs for autism, recognizing the signs for other health impaired. So within our Victor Solution module, training modules, we actually do have modules that focus specifically on recognizing the signs, even for students who may have dyslexia. So there's a variety of modules that we do have, our teachers do have available, and administrators to really look at specific areas in which we may suspect a disability. So that's a great question and something that we continue to refine and refocus on and recognizing kind of the signs that a student may have a disability in a certain area.
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
Thank you. Second round board member, Dr. Juanita Miller.
I just want you to take the note and you can get the information back to me later. I noticed that with the category of autism, it is almost quadrupled in years. I mean, it has become the largest population. And now that we have this business intelligence data collection, I'd like to get some information on, what they can find out in terms of that increase. And the other thing is I have some suggestions for the department in terms of getting coverage for general education teachers to be able to participate in the IEP conferences, because I know that can be it has been a major concern. So I just wanted to put that on the record. And that's it. But still doing a great job. You need to take this business intelligence on the road.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Board members seeing no more, okay, one more light. Hold on. Board member Adam Stafford.
Thank you. I wanted to know schools that are identified as by the state as target support and improvement schools, specifically for the area of special education in terms of that, having that group of students that has not performed over a period of time, what specific supports would we provide as a district to those schools to support them? You know, thinking about, are we going to try some like innovative or new models just based on the fact that they've had like a chronic underperformance of this particular group? And then I wanted to know if you could share, this was in my first round of questioning, about do we provide any support for educators to receive a certification in special education as we do like with the ESOL program? And then lastly, I don't know if it's for this meeting, but maybe if you could speak to, you know, what have you seen as being the most successful tier 1 and tier 2 interventions in supporting students before they get to special education? And if that's for another meeting or a different group, that's fine. Thank you.
So I would say the selection of our TSI and CSI schools, our Division of Accountability could provide you with that information. I know that they just released that through the state, so they would be the best division to provide you with those schools that are identified. Once those schools are identified, we do support those principals and their teams if special ed is identified and they identify that as part of their school improvement plan and process. We do support them in terms of really targeting strategies to help support those students with disabilities specific to mathematics or English language arts, the area that they select, but it's really tailored specifically to an individual school need.
I guess I'm just wondering, how can we as the board support those schools that have that designation? You know, for example, if they have had chronic underperformance of special education students over several years, you know, is it that those particular schools need more paraprofessionals, or do they need to try like different instructional models that like they would need funding for? Like how can we be supportive for those schools? Mm-hmm.
So through our tiered systems of support pilot that we're doing, those are some of the questions that we are trying to address through the pilot of how we're differentiating support to those individual schools. And basically our pilot is working to give each school a report card. Mm-hmm. Each school has been designated a report card as either universal, targeted, or intensive as part of the report card indicators, and 50% of their report card is academic achievement. And so we have partner or are partnering with curriculum and instruction as well as testing to really dig deeper into that data, and then devising a targeted assistance plan for those specific schools. And I can share more about that at a later date once we get through our pilot this year. But the pilot, the tiered systems of support, is really how we're trying to think differently and innovatively to really support schools and meet them where they are to really be able to improve academic achievement. So that's really addressed, I would say, through our tiered systems of support pilot, which we're only at 12 schools for this year. Mm-hmm. And then based on our data, we'll determine what next year will look like, if we're gonna expand the pilot to additional schools, because we wanna gather more data. And part of that is looking at the staffing model for that particular school and how we could look at supporting that school differently, as well as the central office resources that we provide to that school, if that makes sense.
Could I say something to my colleagues quickly, or do I have to ask for a third round? Because I just had a quick comment. You know, when we were speaking, you know, with the state board and talking about, you know, supporting schools in our district, I think that this is an area where the state should support generally, like schools that are identified as needed targeted assistance. And like in other states, what they do is provide like specialized professional development that districts like ours can access for free, because like districts are doing literally everything that they can. I mean, like they have exhausted every resource. They're giving all of the, you know, supports and interventions that they can. But if they are going to identify schools like this, that I think that could be an area of advocacy for us, for Maryland, to look at how other states provide targeted assistance at the state level that districts can access for free.
Okay, thank you. Second round, Board Member Fields.
This is more a reflection than a question. So as we think about teacher shortages, I hope we will encourage students who have come through our special education program and successfully graduate to consider teaching as a career. I have a niece who had a learning disability. She is now an elementary school teacher because she was really passionate about her experience and wanted to help other students like her. So I think, you know, when we start talking about developing teachers, let's not forget about this population of students, because they have something very special to offer and a unique experience. And we all know that it's the relationship often, the life experiences between a teacher and student that really matter. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Second round, Mr. Board Member Briggs.
I just really quickly, in the essence of what Board Member Phil said, I want to keep this quick, but I got back to the question I was trying to ask you, Ms. Bowman, which was around the refugee students that we have and those that have special education needs, and how exactly we kind of needle that thread, because I know that that would be difficult if we have translation services for families. Or, you know, report card pickup is very different from if you have a student continuously who has a translation need. So can you speak to that?
So the great thing is that we do have in special ed, a bilingual assessment team that does provide assessments in a student's native language. If we suspect there is, if a student does not speak English as their primary language and is another, we do have a dual assessment team that can assess those students. That includes related service providers, psychologists, and special educators as part of that team. And so if we suspect a refugee coming in has a disability, and we have teased out that it's not an English language proficiency issue, but in fact it could be manifesting as a disability, we would refer them to our dual language assessment team for assessment.
Thank you. And I guess I'm thinking about the kind of continuous interventions. If you could speak to if there's a deficit or if there's a gap that you think exists around the services we could provide to students that have diverse linguistic needs. You know, I'm thinking about students that are coming from the Caribbean that we have, students that are, you know, again, coming from the Middle East for various reasons, and then we have other wars. So if you could, that's a lot. That's a tall order for, I think, a school to address. Are there gaps there?
We are working on identifying gaps with our ESOL office. So we do have a cross-functional committee with Dr. Melissa Canny, and my coordinating supervisor for K-12. They actually have convened kind of a work group to really look at that particular issue in terms of dual identified students who are ESOL as well as special ed. And so they are working on just some recommendations and looking at our data. And so I don't have anything to share today, but we have convened a cross-functional committee to just look at those dual identified students.
Great. Well, I'm just going to push. I want to plant a seed here, but I think that, you know, there are definitely programs that can address those needs. And I think if it's about us contracting out or other things, I'd love for us as a board and as a body to think about that, those specific individual needs that schools may have.
Thank you so much. Seeing no more lights, to the administration, Dr. Golson, you wanted to say something, Dr.
I do. I just want to, from what you've heard from Ms. Bowman, they are working extremely hard. The processes and procedures they've tried to put in place across the divisions. I just want to really commend her and her team. I'd like to acknowledge her publicly for the work that she's done.
Yes, and I was also going to acknowledge that because we don't have a lot of speakers here, that says you are doing something right. Because it's one thing we know, when the citizens are upset, they let us know. So thank you so much. It was a great presentation, and thank you, Dr. Golson. 4.1, follow-up items will be posted on board docs upon receipt. Board members, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
It has been moved and properly second to adjourn the April 13, 2023 board's work session.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Can I find out who's second?
One of them. Which one? You made the motion. Okay, the board member, student board member. Thank you. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We adjourned at 6:51. 6:51. Okay.
Oh, me? No, see, listen, I thought it was a back office work session.
What's up, man? What's happening, bro?